couple of factors that will influence blood pressure. We've talked about some of these already. One is cardiac output. So remember, cardiac output is essentially your entire blood volume every minute. Cardiac output is the amount of blood that your heart puts out every time it contracts. Okay, so as your heart squeezes, as the ventricle squeezes, how much blood is being ejected? That's called stroke volume times your heart rate. Okay, and so per minute, your heart will move your entire blood volume. Okay, that's your cardiac output. Another factor that will influence blood pressure is resistance. So again, anything that is opposing the flow of blood, anything that's causing resistance or making it hard for blood to move, that will influence your blood pressure. And last is blood volume. The more blood you have, the higher the volume, the higher your pressure is going to be. Again, think of a water balloon. We put more water in it, pressure is going to go up. Okay, same thing happens in our bodies. So the equation that I gave you earlier, where we used all these same terms, which is blood flow equals a change in pressure divided by resistance. So remember, I told you that flow is directly proportional to pressure and it's inversely proportional to resistance. We can actually write this a different way. So we can write this same equation, instead of saying flow, we can call it cardiac output, your entire blood volume. Let's talk about it in those terms. So we can just replace flow with cardiac output. So cardiac output equals a change in pressure over resistance. But really what we're looking at here is blood pressure. So let's take that equation and solve for blood pressure, okay? So if we have cardiac output equals pressure divided by resistance. How we solve for pressure is we multiply both sides by resistance, right? This is just algebra. Our resistance goes away on the right, and what we're left with is resistance times cardiac output equals a change in pressure. So this equation right here. So it's the same thing as this, I just wrote it a different way. I solved for pressure, okay? So now when we look at it this way, we can see, okay, that means that blood pressure varies directly with cardiac output and resistance. So what that means is if your cardiac output goes up, you start pumping out more blood every minute, your blood pressure is going to go up. What would cause your cardiac output to go up? Yeah, exercise, heart rate going up, right? If your heart rate goes up, your cardiac output goes up. So if this number goes up, this number is going up, right? If cardiac output goes up, pressure goes up. Pressure is also going to vary directly with resistance. If resistance to the movement of blood in your body goes up, it's harder for blood to move, your blood pressure is going to go up. So what is something that can cause an increase in resistance? Blood viscosity, how thick your blood is, okay? Vessel length, both of those are pretty consistent. The one thing that can change resistance is vessel diameter. You constrict a vessel and now it's harder for blood to flow through that, right? So if you increase resistance, you are going to increase your blood pressure. Again, think of a water balloon. If you take a water balloon and you start squeezing on it, the pressure in that balloon is going up. Same thing happens in your blood vessels. If your vessels constrict and get smaller, your pressure is going to go up, right? So in this equation, we can see that blood pressure varies directly with cardiac output. Cardiac output goes up, pressure goes up. It also varies directly with resistance. If your resistance goes up, this number gets higher, your pressure goes up. Now, the only one that is not explained in this equation is blood volume. So I'm going to star that down here. That is not in the equation. If your blood volume changes, your blood pressure will also change. Again, think of a water balloon. if you add more water to a water balloon, what's going to happen to the pressure? It's going to go up, right? So if your blood volume goes up, your pressure goes up. What happens if there's less blood in your body? Your pressure is going to come down, right? So this is why I mentioned this earlier. This is why it's so dangerous when people have wounds where they are bleeding out. If you are losing a lot of fluid, the problem is that your pressure is tanking. It's going down because you're losing blood, okay? So that will also play a role on blood pressure. So what we say in your body, does your blood pressure change a lot? Like every day, every minute? No. Is your pressure all over the place? No. What is your pressure? 120 over 80, pretty much all the time, right? Remember in Anatomy 1, we talked about homeostasis and how that is how we maintain that sort of even keel, how we keep everything stable. So typically what we find is that if one of these things vary, so if your heart rate goes up, maybe you're exercising, if heart rate goes up, in order to make pressure not go up, what would we do to resistance? We'd bring it down, right? So we would maybe dilate our vessels and make them bigger, decrease resistance so that our pressure doesn't change, okay? So this is why we say if one variable changes, the other variable will be compensated so that pressure stays the same. We don't want our pressure to change. So we have ways that we can maintain a blood pressure. We have what are called short-term controls and long-term controls. Short-term is exactly what it sounds like it is. These are things that we can change quickly. So these are going to help to counteract any fluctuations in blood pressure. And this is going to change resistance and cardiac output. So these are short-term controls. Your body, your heart rate can change quickly. Cardiac output can change quickly. Resistance can change quickly. We can change vessel diameter very fast. Those are short-term controls. Okay. Long-term controls. How can we change our blood pressure over the long term? That's where volume is going to come in. So remember, let's go back. Remember, I told you that this is the one variable that's not in this equation, okay? Blood volume. If we change our volume, we're going to change our pressure. We're not changing our volume all the time, but if we need to, we can. It just takes a lot longer, okay? So that's much more of a long-term regulation. So let's do some of these short-term controls. Let's talk about these. The first ones are some neural controls. So neural controls might be in order for you to maintain a blood pressure, you can alter vessel diameter, right? That's going to change resistance. Whoops. That's going to change resistance. Now you can alter vessel diameter pretty much anywhere in your body. Where you're not going to be altering vessel diameter is going to be in places like to the heart and the brain. You can't shut off blood flow to the brain. You can't constrict vessels going to the brain. You can't constrict the ones going to the heart, okay? So those will always stay the same. But vessels going to the muscles or to your GI tract, those can get bigger, they can get smaller, okay? We can change those, and that will help to maintain a pressure, and we can do it quickly. Another one is altering blood distribution to organs. This happens all the time. Again, we're going to dilate or constrict vessels depending on where we need blood to go, right? I know I've given you this example before. When you're exercising, vessels going into your muscles are going to dilate, get big, because you need to send that blood out to your muscles, right? When you eat a meal, vessels going to your GI tract will dilate and get big, because you need the blood in your intestines. So this is just an image that's showing you that. So it's showing you vasoconstriction, you can see here, and vasodilation. And again, both of those are going to have a huge role on resistance. If you constrict a vessel, resistance is going to go up. Okay, that's going to cause your blood pressure to go up. If you dilate a vessel, your resistance will come down. and that'll cause your pressure to come down. So these images in your book, the teeter-totters, are basically showing you how we maintain a blood pressure, how we keep a balance. Now, all of our neural controls, they're going to operate through a reflex arc. This is something we talked about in Anatomy 1. A reflex arc just involves a receptor picking up a change, sends the signal to the brain receives it, interprets it, sends information back to an effector. So you get some kind of change. And so we have in our body something called baroreceptors. These are receptors picking up change. And in this case, they are basically going to be stimulated anytime your blood pressure gets too low. Sorry, they're going to be stimulated anytime your blood pressure is a little too high, and they're going to cause your blood pressure to come back down. Okay, so a baroreceptor, we're going to find these in like vessels, like the carotid sinus, the aorta. And if pressure's too high, they get stimulated and they say, oh, our pressure's too high. We need to make some adjustments to bring pressure back down. Chemoreceptors, these are picking up chemical fluctuations. So these are things that will be activated, for example, if your CO2 levels go up. CO2 is a waste, okay? These will be activated. If your pH goes down and becomes more acidic, this actually links back to CO2 because CO2 is an acid. When you dissolve CO2 in a liquid, it's acidic, okay? So if CO2 goes up, your pH is going down because you have more of that CO2. Or even if oxygen levels start to fall. When I look at those, all of those chemical changes, I'm thinking of exercise, right? When you exercise, oxygen levels are going down, CO2 levels are going up, and your body is compensating in lots of ways, okay? One thing you're gonna do is you're gonna breathe faster, okay? That's one thing you'll do. Another is your cardiac output will start going up. Heart rate's gonna go up. You exercise, your heart rate goes up, so cardiac output goes up. Your vessels are gonna start to constrict, and that's gonna cause your blood pressure to rise. Now, chemoreceptors play a much bigger role in respiration rate than they do in maintaining your blood pressure. And blood pressure is maintained mostly through baroreceptors. They're picking up a pressure change. Chemoreceptors play a huge role in breathing rate, but they can influence blood pressure. Now we do have areas in the brain like the medulla oblongata and the hypothalamus. These have a set point for all of these conditions in your body, your blood pressure and your oxygen levels and your CO2 levels and the acid concentrations. And those areas of your brain know what it should be. So again, when a sensor or a receptor picks up there's something different and sends it to the brain, that information is going to places like the medulla oblongata and the hypothalamus. And those are the areas of your brain that are going, that's off. That's the wrong set point. We need to adjust this. Okay. Now, we also have long-term mechanisms. So again, everything that we've talked about is we can change them quickly. We can adjust our heart rate. We can change our cardiac output fast. We can adjust resistance by dilating or constricting vessels very quickly. What we can't change quickly is blood volume. Okay? We can't change the amount of blood that we have in the body quickly. That takes days to happen. So this is why we call this a long-term mechanism. In order for you to be able to adjust your blood volume, like I mentioned, it takes days. It also relies on your kidneys. So this is why we call this renal regulation. Why would we ever need to adjust our blood volume? The reason, let's go back to this slide back here. I told you that baroreceptors, these are picking up a change in pressure, right? If your pressure goes up, baroreceptors, which line your arteries, detect high pressure. They tell your brain and your brain goes, oh, that's too high. We need to change our cardiac output. We need to change our resistance, and they'll bring pressure back down. Chemoreceptors, these are more for breathing, but they can play a role, right? These baroreceptors are the biggest thing to give you quick adjustments in a blood pressure, right? However, baroreceptors will very quickly stop responding if your pressure is high all the time. You've seen this happen before, right? Sometimes, like I always think of like my wedding ring. I remember when I first got engaged and I had my big old engagement ring on and I like noticed it and I'd look at it and let it get all sparkly in the light and I'd play with it. And now, like, I honestly don't even know there's a ring on my finger because it's there all the time. I've stopped responding to it. Kind of like if you wear contact lenses, first time you put them in your eye, it's like, what is this? And then after like a week or two, you forget they're in, you fall asleep with them in, right? You stop responding. If there is a sense, something that is constantly being sensed in your body, you'll stop responding to it. Baroreceptors are no different. If your blood pressure is always high, basically they're like, forget it, not gonna respond anymore. This is why you need long-term controls. This is why you would change the amount of blood volume that you have. Because baroreceptors can adapt to a chronic high or low blood pressure, and they're not effective anymore at helping to regulate blood pressure. So your long-term mechanism, we say it's renal regulation. So you are controlling the amount of blood that you have due to your kidneys. If your blood volume is high, your blood pressure is also going to be high, right? Again, think of a water balloon. So a high blood volume, a high blood pressure, your kidneys say, oh boy, that's too much. We need to get rid of some of that. And how they do it is they eliminate more water. So you'll urinate more. By urinating more, you're bringing your fluid volume down, which is going to bring your pressure down, right? But it's going to take time for that to happen. That can't happen in seconds. It usually will take about 24 to 48 hours. The opposite happens if your blood volume is low. Blood volume's low, let's say you're dehydrated. If you're dehydrated, remember plasma is like 90-something% water, right? So if you're dehydrated, your blood volume's low. You're gonna feel it. You're gonna feel dizzy, you might have a headache, you might be cold. What's gonna happen is your kidneys are gonna go, oh, our blood pressure's a little low. Let's save some water. You're not gonna urinate. And by not urinating out as much water, you save water and it'll bring your blood volume back up, which will help to bring your pressure back up. Okay, so this is how we're gonna regulate blood volume. It's truly through the kidneys. It's by eliminating extra water or saving it. So this is just a picture that's showing you if your blood volume is high and your blood pressure is high, your kidneys will eliminate more water to bring both of those back down. Down here, it's showing you that if your blood volume is low and your pressure is low, your kidneys will conserve water to bring it back up. Okay, so it's just showing you the opposites.